this is 2012 pixels when I first time met Carlos, and then after I stick with Carlos in iDempiere project both. So in 2012, our journey with iDempiere started, and still working with iDempiere. I am one of the top makers from India in iDempiere, and today I am going to cover the topic of recent enhancement in workflow done by Logilite technologies. So before coming to this enhancement, these 6 enhancements that we have recently done, and we are in I think the first one is already into core, but other are in a peer review queue. Why those are required, and why we feel it is important, because our goal is to support instead of a document workflow, making a workflow as a more process oriented, in a what we can say that the business processes kind of workflow. So we are working in a pharmaceutical industries recently from last 3 years, and we found there is a lot of requirements of related to control the processes in integrated quality management systems. Okay, and we comes with some of these bottleneck with our existing workflow, and so we have started with this all new features. So first one is overriding workflow responsible at tenant level. So these features, why it is important, because if anyone working in a multi-tenant environment and they want to write a workflow once but want to use by every tenants, correct, means making reusable for every tenant, then the first problem comes is defining the workflow responsibles. So what is workflow responsible? If anyone are familiar with the business process modeling, correct, it's represent like swim lane. Swim lane or workflow responsible are a way to configure who can perform a task or who can approve. Okay, so in iDempiere we say workflow responsible, and it's provide a way to configure who can approve a task or who can work on that particular task. Now, what problem we face in a multi-tenant environment if we are defining a workflow into a system tenant? As workflow responsible need to specify on a workflow node, and if our workflow is defined in a system tenant, then we may not have accessibility to the role or user which are exist into a tenant. Well, that was a major problem. So we can't make our workflow reusable. After these features, it's quite possible that we have one common workflow process, and every tenants are defining their workflow responsible as they need. For example, if we take example of a purchase order approval workflow, and approver in one tenant, approver can be a particular role, or in another tenant it may be a particular person, correct. So tenant admin can configure its own workflow responsible even though the standard workflow are configured at the system level. So what we have done to overcome this limitation is we have added, I will show you. I think I need to. Okay, so I think I need to switch mode, share screen. So what we have added is just strange. Okay, I need to switch to the garden world tenant. Okay, so we have added the field called override workflow responsible, which is visible only in a other than system tenant. Okay, now for example, if your workflow is using, for example, this is system tenant defined workflow responsible. It says that PO approver and it is a human and it's super user. But if a workflow is initiated in a say garden world tenant, correct? Obviously, super user is not an employee of garden world. So what system will do if it found that any workflow responsible is present in a system tenant and is set on a particular node, and if user are initiating that workflow and it's found that it is a role or human type, then system give errors that you may missing a configurations because your tenant has not defined your PO approver in your tenant. Okay, so what the tenant admin can do, he is go and create a new records with the tenant specific workflow responsible, and it's mentioned that I am overriding PO approver workflow responsible, and now instead of human, it is a role. Okay, I can change even responsible type at tenant level. So system tenant may say it may be a human, but at a tenant level you can say is a manual, or you can say it organization or supervisor or anything. So you can switch even a responsible type, and you can provide who will be a responsible in your tenant. Okay, so just say undo. Okay, next is, so next enhancement is see, there is one more limitations about approval kind of workflow, and we have, that is like we can't define the multiple approval node. Why? Because how the approval workflow are configured in iDempiere is we have to create a node with the type of I will show you. If I want to define, means earlier if I want to define approval workflow, then I have to add a node with action type as a user choice, and I have to specify column name as is approved. If column name is other than is approved, workflow engine did not consider it as an approval node, and it behave differently. So to overcome these limitations, now what happened, due to these limitations I can't add two approval node. Let's say that my department manager need to approve first and then procurement manager approves, correct? I can't do two approval node. So to overcome that limitations, we added a new field called approval column. Why we didn't make like if a column is specified, then it's always approval column? Because in current iDempiere implementations, if other than is approved column is used, then the system's behavior are changed and it treat as a normal user task. Okay, so that to keep that behavior as it is, okay, and to allow to support multiple approval columns and multiple approval nodes, we have introduced new column called approval column. So whenever a value is present into approval column, the node is considered as a always considered as a approval node. Okay, so this is a second enhancement allowing have a multiple approval node. Now why we need, because if we consider of the purchase order, correct, there is a rare requirement, but in a pharma industry, when we think about the integrated quality management system, there are multiple roles comes into pictures and multiple approvals are there. So they have to go, one document has to go through the multiple departments and level of approval before it is finalized. And even same department has to do multiple approval. So for example, for opening a new request, there is approval, and closing also there is another approval from same department. Correct? So that's why we need a multiple approval nodes. Okay, the next enhancement is, this is very important enhancement. I say it add many other capability. So user type of the workflow node. So what is a user task type node? So one of the things we came up with the restriction is like we are developing like artwork management, artwork approval workflow. So in pharma industries, what happened? Every artwork need to be approved by customers and QA department. And in that particular workflow, there is a task like which are not performed as which are not a approval task, but is a actual user task. They perform offline. For example, they design a artwork. Okay. So what happened? There is a artwork will be initiated from some other department like purchasing department or someone initiate the request, and then it's a flow through the different department. Now problem was that when I'm using the user choice kind of the workflow, if my login user and responsible user are same, it never suspend, but it automatically complete that particular node and goes to the next node. That means it workflow do not wait for the confirmation from the user that I have finished my task. Okay, so to overcome that limitations, we have created a new action type as a user task type of the action. So how it is different from user choice? One thing is it always require explicit confirmation from the user that I have completed this task. So let's say that my previous node is completed by me and I am responsible for the next task, next node, and if I am performing the previous task, it will not automatically mark my next task as a completed, but it suspend and wait for my second confirmation that I have completed this particular task. Okay, so that is how it is different from the user choice. In user choice case, what happened? When user choice has a workflow responsible defined, okay, and if I completed previous task and in next task also I am responsible, then it is system automatically marked as a completed. Okay, and it's go to the next task, next node execution. Second thing is that how it is different from user choice is that we have added the approval columns, but if it is a user task type of the workflow, okay, I will show you. This is user task. It do not show approval column because user tasks are not normally approval node, but it provide you a column field, and still you can use you can set variables for any columns in user task kind of a workflow. Now when I am talking about this, it again make me it's again enable to use user task kind of action for approval kind of task, because I can still set any, but behavior will be different. So how the user choice and user task approval kind of node has a different behavior. Whenever the user choice kind of the nodes are rejected, iDempiere always terminate that particular workflow instance, mark as a terminated, and user has to start from beginning. So it created new workflow instance. So it's not working into same workflow instance. Okay, so to give you example like how we can create how we can use user task kind of a node and we enable the approval flow using the workflow. I will show you a procurement workflow in the editors. Okay, so here the manager approval, okay, this node is user task type of the node. Okay, how we can differentiate, because the we don't have an icon here, and in workflow editors for user choice we have this kind of icons. Okay, so this is user task type of the node. Now what I have done is I have configured a user columns to set value, means take the input from the user, and depending on that I have added two transition. If it is successful, then it go to the validation node, and if it fail, means user has rejected this particular approval, then it goes to the correction stage. Okay, now see, this is a new things, correct? Now earlier what happened, whenever in user choice case, if approver is rejecting, then the workflow terminate and document status mark as a not approved. So that workflow instance, correct, we have to again start a new workflow process which start from here, go to doc prepare and again comes into the manager approval. So the user who has initiated workflow was not notified ever. He has to go to a window and look for the not approved records, and then only he is able to find it. But now, as the task is assigned to him as a correction task, okay, I created another user task which is correction task, and as correction task is defined like as a workflow responsible is an initiator of a workflow, it automatically goes to the person who has initiated this workflow, and he knows that I have to work, I have to correct my data or whatever, and I have to send back to the approver. So this another approval process is also get enabled by user task, and this kind of node are a differentiator between the user choice, because behavior are different in both kind of user choice and user task kind of the action. Okay, so next one is we have introduced to new responsible type. So when we are defining workflow responsibles, we have a field called responsible type. Earlier we had a human where we can make particular system user, or we can say that iDempiere user as a responsible for particular approval or task. Then it was a manual where user has to, the person who are completing a particular task has to say, tell system who will be the next approver or next responsible. Organization where the organization's supervisor is responsible for approval of approval or completion of that particular task, and role where we can define the anybody belonging to particular role can finish that task. Okay, this was there in iDempiere, and we added two new initiator and supervisor. So other than this one, okay, there is another kind of a responsible possible. It is called invoker, and how it is configured is like we say responsible type as a human, and we keep user contact field as a blank. Then system consider is a invoker, means whoever is performing the action is a responsible. Okay, so current login user is considered as a responsible for that particular task. So let's say I am completing the previous task and comes to the next node, okay, and at that time system assigned the current user as a responsible for particular that particular task. Okay, that was the invoker behavior. But there was no way, for example, here in workflow editor, I want the correction should be done by the person who is initiating my workflow. So in case of the purchase order, correct, for example, a department is production department is creating a purchase order, and I want that production department, the person exactly who has initiated a workflow will responsible for my correction of that particular node if my manager disapprove, correct. So that was not possible. So after adding the initiator type of the workflow responsible, I can say that okay, if for correction kind of the task, the whoever has initiated my workflow is responsible for completing that particular task. Okay, second one is second workflow responsible is a supervisor. Now here it is very important to understand like who will be the supervisor, is like an initiator supervisor or whose supervisor will be responsible. So in supervisor case, it is always the current login user supervisor is considered as a supervisor, means it is not the initiator supervisor. So there may be cases, for example, in this workflow, let's say that this procurement approval, okay, is workflow responsible for this particular procurement approval node is defined as a supervisor. Okay, now when we enter into the procurement approval node, when somebody are completing or confirming that I have completed validation task. Okay, so the person who are completing the validation task may be a different than the initiator. So system will look for the supervisor of the previous node completer. and assign to his supervisor, means it is current login user, correct? So that's how it works. So that's how I can say that if procurement departments are validating, then procurement manager is actually assigned for the approval. Okay, the next one is again very important features. It's multi-variable support for workflow nodes. So we have seen that here in nodes, correct, if user task type or user choice type of the node, we have a way to set some columns, correct, on our records. But what about if I have to set multiple variables? Okay, I want to set is approved as well as, for example, I want to put a description. I want to update my description. Okay, so how we can achieve it? So in workflow, it was possible to achieve it, but how? Because using the set variable kind of node. But now if I have to set the 5 such a variable, then I have to create 5 different nodes in my workflow, and my workflow become lengthy, very complex. And another issue is that it do not follow atomicity. Means, for example, in 5 nodes, if one node is failed, then whatever node are executed, they are executed and they are committed. Okay, that means what? Those changes are already persisted. So my record showing wrong data. Correct? So after this enhancement, we can, if node is successfully executed, then only variable are updated on that particular node. So what we have done is, when it is a user task type or user choice or a set variable type of node, it will show a sub tab called variable. Okay, and in a variable node you can set columns and whatever your attribute values, and you can add such a multiple variables here. And even if you are using the column field, correct, it will also respect that one also. So it will take the column field as well as all the variables you have defined in a subtab. Okay, so after doing this, one more important, these features bring one more important enhancement. For example, I am defining a change control workflow here, correct? I have so many custom nodes. Okay, so if I don't have a multi variable supports, and I don't have a like user task kind of support, then what I have to do? I have to create a document status for each of this node. Okay, which will make my document status list as very bulky and unmanageable in iDempiere, because then the document action and permission and everything I have to add for these all things. But now after using the user task and multiple variable setup and features, correct, I can define this kind of workflow without adding any new document status or anything, because I can add my custom status field, which will do not change the document status behavior. It keeps the document status as it is, and I can introduce new column saying that change control status. Okay, and every node can set their change control status as it is executed. And second thing, even I don't require any approval kind of the columns. Okay, is approved kind of columns whenever it is a user task. For example, here assessment is a user task, it's not approval. Okay, this is not approval kind of things. It is just a user task. User has to just classify the change request and make the responsible department and create a new assessment records and assign to the assessment records. Okay, so this is just another task, not approval. Okay, so at that time I don't need any flag. I don't need to add any flag into my change control record. Okay, so this is and even the adding the one document status field, correct, I can say that okay, what is my what all possible status of my change controls. Okay, so this workflow can be defined without any coding. Okay, now the next enhancement, if we are we are adding these all custom nodes, correct, such kind of custom nodes. There is no way to validate. For example, if someone are performing the assessment, there is no way in iDempiere to validate that the user has really created assessment record. Okay, because we have a in workflow we have a standard document action and validation logic only invoked for the standard uh, workflow action like prepare, complete, reverse correct, but there is no way to uh, initiate a model event for a custom kind of uh, workflow node. So what we have added is new model event called workflow execution. So what workflow execution event will do, whenever any user task, user choice or document action kind of node process, mark process, it will fire an event with the type as a workflow execution. It passes the reference of the execution node itself. So whatever the task, whatever the activity that we are performing, it passed to the reference. So our validation logic can capture it and attach any dynamic uh, logic to validate that person has really completed this, person has given the attachment or not. Because many times we need a proof, correct? So validation is like validating like a real user are not just clicking, confirming the task without actually doing the work, correct? So that validation we can attach to the any custom workflow node also. Okay, so that is all about workflow enhancement. Any question?
I would like to ask, you mentioned about a click. Simple use case. This workflow should send an email, then user should approve by clicking, by confirming something, and that the workflow move to the next step. This can be possible with this fast improvement?
There is, we haven't done any enhancement like sending link into email yet, correct? But
because this is something that is really common nowadays, and without this is only a closed system inside. So we need to open somehow to outside,
yeah,
communicate, emails or other mediums.
that may be a good case for the wish list, correct? So no, currently, yeah.
But currently it is possible to set up a node that sends out the mail. Why isn't that possible here?
We haven't added any like enhancement to do that, because there is a email kind of workflow node and you can send email, but it's not like for any approval or user task kind of node it send email, correct? It's you have to use the special action type as a email in that case.
Why couldn't you add that step?
It is possible, correct, but currently it is missing. That features is missing.
Not requested.
I'm only wondering why it's missing, because it was available. Did you complete new workflow?
No, because I don't have any good answer, but because no one has shown that interest, correct, or no one has worked on it, that's why it's missing.
Okay.
Is it already in the code or?
Yes, so the first ticket, correct, is already in a core. Okay, and PR are created for all these core ticket up to this one, and this one is in progress. So maybe
Is it okay?
nearby week or we have a new PR for this one.
I think about this question because it's already. I think I did something with a functionality inside iDempiere that is the process to send email, and I just put it as a node in and execute that process and use the template with a variable with the link to the window that we can share the link, the URL. So that URL sends to you your iDempiere tenant, or you log in and open the window already to approve iDempiere. And that's with all iDempiere. It's not only. So you put a note to execute a process. That process is email and use the template.
So even for sending email, okay, it's
you,
not
you don't use email. You use process. No, you don't use email. You use execute process. When you call the email process, you have a send email process, and you put that to a user with the parameter as a variable. You put that variable and execute the process, and with a template sends the URL, and that's the.
So that is like a way of achieving same thing using plugin.
No, it's not with a plugin. It's in iDempiere.
You have to write a custom process, correct? For that.
No, there is a process to send the email process, the send email process that you have that we have already in iDempiere.
Okay.
With that process, we execute and send it. One of the parameters are the user are going to receive the email.
And are there attachments for that?
It was my improvement to put the attachment, but the email the process say if you find it in the search, please if you put it in the search it says I'm write email in the search above.
Here you say
Above in the search above allá where you write workflow arriba up.
okay here
Email.
email.
You should.
I
You're like system administrator. You have to be in garden world.
right.
You're as a system. In garden world.
Okay.
Garden. Okay. And you search for email. Please. No. Put send maybe.
Send mail text.
Send mail test. You can put a mail template to say, for example, I did an improvement. I remember right now to put who are going to be the recipient and attach the document, but that with the process. Just do a listen.
But Frank's question is like sending a link to approve a task.
Because in the mail template you can put custom variables, and you then put an URL format.
Do we have a variable for execution of node?
A variable to go to when you open the tenant, go to already to the window to do some task.
No,
So the
I
improvement is
think
not.
there is a variable means link. There is a link for opening a record,
Yeah.
but we don't have a like a approve disapprove kind of link.
Yeah, that was a configuration for to put some improvement or a check or something, but using the functionality of iDempiere to open a link inside the iDempiere and sending witness.
And the second thing is also important, like opening a record is not important here because we have to open a activity form from where actually confirmation or approval will be done, correct? Because that is performed from here. So approval is always performed from activity, workflow activities. From this,
The form.
I think, yeah, activity form. Workflow activities form, this one. So normally workflow approval will be performed from this form. So it's important that we open the workflow activities from email. Any other question?
You
Your last slide was wish list.
Yeah.
Are those things the ideas for future?
Yes. So these all are the ideas for future enhancement. So currently, still, for example, whenever we are performing workflow actions, correct, we have to go to the workflow activities, and there we have to select answer, correct. We have way to just select the answer yes or no for list, and based on that, it's based on the answer the workflow decide the transitions, correct. So that means it is mandate you have added one columns in your record which is persisted, and based on that the decision are came in which route I have to go. But it is always obviously required is like we want to reduce the unnecessary columns into a table, and that's why giving a way to select the transition. So I have a two transition. I name the transition as like approve, reject, correct? And you choose approve or reject, correct? And
it's a X or
Y. Yeah, it may be a 3 or 4 decision, correct? So depending on the current activity, current state, it says that how many possible transitions, and you select one, and accordingly workflow transit to the next status. Second is a workflow context variable. So currently there is no concept of context variable. So what happened? I have to add unnecessary columns for next node to know what was the decision from a user in a previous node. I have to persist some value into database, and only way to persist it on a record only, correct? Because workflow node do not pass anything other than the PO. So concept is like if we introduce the persistable context variable into workflow process, so then what happen? Every workflow process may have a certain parameters which can be set by different nodes or based on the user input. So we don't need to create a unnecessary columns in our data data entry tables. Okay. Another thing is we have seen that multiple variable features, correct? Now the question, for example, user task kind of workflow node are there. Then question comes, when to set that variable? When I entering into the node or exit from the node, correct? So there are two states. One is before suspending, it comes to the execution node, running node, then it suspend. Okay, and then again it is resume when user confirms it. So where I have to set this variable? When I am exiting from particular state, or when I am entering into this particular state. So giving the bifurcation, like this variable should be set on entry into that particular state or exit of the state will be good, and we can manage like even record status in both way. Like sometimes our state may say approval, and sometimes state name are approved, correct? Approved means after approval. The state after approval is approved, and when it is waiting for approval, it is approved, correct? So if my status is like approved, rejected, like that, then if it is executed, then only I have to set that particular variable. Then again wish list from Frank to have a approval link in email. Frank. Yeah.
Can I add enhancement to the wish list? Email approval link, maybe add expiry. So you have to approve in certain time, today, 42 hours.
So here the thing is like that, if it has an expiry, correct, and if it expires, then do workflow node has to roll back or what? Because
yes, so you have to have the if expired search option. Yeah, approve, disapprove, expire.
I don't think any use cases, but because even if we are giving the link, correct, then on clicking on the link, user has to log in into the system before confirming that it is approved or not. Correct.
I
So
about use case. I send a quotation to a customer. Customer accept, no accept, or do nothing. It's not accept. So if accept, you create an order. Okay. If do nothing, you send another step to follow.
In some
it's in a time frame.
After
After
24
24 hours, 48 hours,
Mhm.
customer did not answer,
Mm.
so I will do a call or a follow-up. It would be nice.
Yes. Maybe the workflow processor
Mm.
should have, because we are experimenting a lot with iDempiere, you know, and we are using also iDempiere for support desk.
Mhm.
And there is a workflow processor, the request processor, where you set if the time is over, then happening something. But I think some features also in the workflow can be done by workflow processor. So we had a chat. My use case was, if I remember, there is a customer order, and if it is not purchased over 12 hours, for example,
Mm.
then it try again and come back and try. And if not, then it's expired and close it.
Mhm.
And this is very similar,
Okay.
I think.
So,
the processor can be
bringing the request window in a pictures, correct? I have just corrected one improvement in user task of the node. So we have a two kind of workflow, like a document processing kind of
Yes.
workflow, and we have a document value kind of workflow.
Yes.
So when it is a document value kind of workflow, it can be attached to the any kind of tables, like even master data request, correct, where there is no document action buttons. Okay, so in that workflow, what I found that user choice do not work with document value kind of workflow, and as we have tried to make user choice as similar to the user task, I found that for the document value kind of workflow, even our user task enhancement do not work. But we change it and we make it compatible to the document value kind of workflow. So now the user task kind of node you can use for the document value kind of workflow, where there is no document action defined, correct? So it's not, the model is not uh, type of the action type of the model. Okay, it still work.
Another interesting term for my daughter, right now, which is the touch point. And here, this workflow engine was designed for web UI. We named the web UI as back office. But all those questions, like how our task in this year or latest years are to move information appropriately internally into the company and outside between clients and various workflows. So here, I think we need to discuss on workshop also how to generalize it and not take into the context only web UI, like the back office and internal
Yes.
processes, but outside. And probably maybe interfacing interesting, because if you don't want to develop everything as exists, then you can interface it and use it. Services like AWS or other services can do that and take action for it.
So yeah, document action kind of workflow, correct, currently can be executed by processes, and even I think web services supports execution of this kind of document action kind of workflow. But this new node, correct, user task and this new enhancement, we have to check, like will it work with REST services and web services or not, and how we can enable it to even work with REST services. Do REST service support VX REST service support workflow executions? Workflow executions?
It just uses what is configured. It uses the model, so what happens in the model, it works.
Yeah, because here, correct, it's not a model, because we are not setting value. Like in doc action kind of workflow, we are able to execute because we set the doc action as a next value, and it's automatically trigger the execution of workflow.
There is an endpoint for workflows, and we have the approved node. But with this, I think we need to add the other new options to the actions. Yeah.
Okay.
We just have approved.
Yeah.
Node, I think, in REST. But
So another important wish list, okay, and we recently comes is like what Edilson has developed. Correct, he has to change into the core, but it is a local core, and he approached us for like, can be converted into the plugins. But looking into the how it is done, correct, it's look like it cannot be converted to the plugin because the workflow activity form need to be changed. And goal is like to reduce the number of workflow definitions in a system. Same workflow definition can serve to the multiple documents, and it's like reduce the configuration step per tenant, because the idea is like you can define the level of approvals in a table format per tenant, and workflow executions will just read that. Even workflow responsible you define in that particular table, and is a simple general workflow which is looping through those all levels, okay, and it's just executing one level after another level like that. So it's a nice concept by Edison, and I think we should discuss and try to accept in a core, correct? So we'll reduce the number of workflow definition node, and we can generalize it. I say we can generalize and make admin tenant admin configurable workflow approvals.
About the approval link, the idea is to provide a Zoom link for a user to log in, or is an approval link?
No, I am
except
thinking, for example, if there is a yes and no two values available for user answer, correct? Then giving yes and no link.
But no login, no need
No,
to login.
no, it's required login. But once he click on a link, it's take to the web UI, and he has to log in there. So if it is his user is already logged in, then it use that particular login session.
So it's like a Zoom link.
Yeah, Zoom link, similar Zoom link, but maybe a new link for workflow execution.
But when it's for outside user as customer, better the link into the application.
We have a authentication token features. So whenever in a Zoom link also, if we put the authentication token, it will auto login. So for a customer kind of approval, you can actually generate the temporary expirable. Oh, see, expirable comes there. So authentication token are expirable. So if we adopt that authentication token features, correct, system can generate the temporary authentication token assigned to that particular user, and it set the expiry date for that particular authentication token.
So about, I would like about the workflow activity, the form that we use to approve. Is there a reason that we can, for a customer, I move that to an info window for multiple improvement and move the button to a process. So it works fine. So there is a particular reason that this cannot be moved permanently or as a core as an info window and not that window, because that has limitation. You cannot approve many multiples records. If you wanna put more parameters, or put, for example, if you say yes, do things, or you say no, do things that you can do with a process, you cannot do that here.
I think it is possible to convert into info window, because info window is quite powerful now, and you can create a process, correct, and you can attach any process here.
And also you can do info windows preference in the tenant level. You have a general, so you can have for the table, for example, the order improvement, the input improvement, the info improvement.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that sounds interesting to
Yes.
move this to an info window. But also in the Zoom link doesn't work with info windows. We just
No.
can zoom to Windows.
Windows only, records.
So that would be another need there. To zoom to an info window or a record in an info window.
Yeah.
You know, also about what you said, like a public link that doesn't require authentication.
I don't think public link is good,
Token is good.
but token is acceptable, correct? You
But
can
the
generate
public-
temporary token, expirable tokens, and
No, but a public link with a UUID, for example, is not 100% safe, but
Yeah.
it's safe. Yeah. With expiration, it's safer.
but you can't define the expirations there, correct? So authentication token has already expiration features.
For example, AWS.
You have to repeat, Gaurav.
Okay, sorry. So instead of adding this approval link as a part of a workflow, I would suggest this can be a different functionality altogether, because I have seen in ERP Next and in Odoo, you can send an order for a customer approval without they have to log in. Okay, so what they receive is like a print format. Okay, what we send, so it has a detail of the work orders, everything, and they can either approve and pay. Okay, so I'm not talking about the payment part, okay, but at least the approval part, because that's something which I have seen in ERP Next and in Odoo. So I think we can separate this from workflow and make this as a different like approach altogether. That's what I feel, because I have seen this, and this is something which they say as a free feature.
So what we discuss is like a generalized way of achieving same thing.
Yeah.
So when we are sending as a HTML type of the email template, correct? If we use the HTML type of the email template, we can give them buttons like yes and no to the user, but beside that there is a hyperlink with authentication token and action as a like execute particular task or confirm the task, correct? So in activity in a workflow case, correct, we normally say confirm task or approve task, correct? There are two words used for completing a node or execution of a particular node. So we can say that we create a Zoom link for like instead of Zoom link we can say that confirmation link, and the confirmation link has two value, like it provide either yes or no. If list kind of input are given, then even user can choose from there are multiple options given, you can choose from the available options.
Yeah, but a link with a token is like a public link. If somebody reads the email, can click it.
Yes, if he want to confirm, then he can click on that particular link.
This is like public, yeah.
Not a public. Authentication token is not public link, correct?
No,
So
but you need to put it in the email in the token.
Yes.
So it's public. It becomes
is a public means whoever receives that email, who can read email, they can click. Yeah.
I think it could be also a public link, not need for a token.
So, AWS, for example, has the S3 service, and you can share the link, and you can ask in the CLI you want to share in 5 minutes, 15, or 1 hour, 24 hours, and others. So that is public or not, because it has expiration. It's quite complicated, so secure, and it's the action is only download, or in case of S3 is download, but in this case it's upload or reject or other action.
Yeah, same Azure do same things like every time you create a link, it create a separate link, correct? It's a
Yes.
separate identifier,
Yes.
and you can provide the permissions and everything on that particular link.
But that is, from my perspective, is as I'm a bit disappointed as a product manager or manager with the question. Okay, can we do this? Okay, we need to write the process. Can we do this? It is similar to this, but we need to write the second process. And what we are doing, we are always writing the same and very similar. And I think, based on experience we can collect, like other systems and big players like AWS, there are many concepts which can be put into the small, like reusable functionality. You can call it again and again. For example, we wrote, we have a bit customer's authorization, and we have a registration, and we just write again the process we are calling from the front end and do the same. Just upload the link. Or web form, it's very similar. So would be great if we can make it interfaceable. Maybe this is not the part of the workflow, but maybe it's a bit utilities, I think, and then can use it in various use cases like sending to customer email or workflow approval or registration. Other maybe I think it's simple. Not? Mostly. Thanks.
Thinking about public URLs, maybe that can be done in REST plugin. Yeah? We could have some way to do public things in REST, find public that doesn't require authentication and do some things. Could be interesting.
Yeah, may work. But again, the expirability, correct? We have to link some identifiers.
The expirability probably it could be defined.
And why my preference on authentication token, because it has already expirability.
But the expires the authentication, not the.
Yeah, means it uses authenticating the link, correct? So it's not a real user, it's just a identifier, and it has a parameterized like who can use this particular token. Like you can restrict by IP address or server also. It can be used from this IP address only.
But that is not in iDempiere.
But in public case it is not. But
we have what you mentioned is not in iDempiere. We have tokens in REST, but not in iDempiere.
not in iDempiere. In web services we have added that features, but we haven't added into core yet. So nobody I think has idea about that authentication token features.
Mix a bit again.
Yeah.
Maybe 7 years ago, you had the concept of authorization token. We take it, we use it, and what we did, we create various type of tokens. That's
Yeah.
time it was
Yes,
SOAP.
Yeah, we say authentication token, not
Yes,
authorization.
but the new feature came with a different approach a bit. But we build it, and for example, I can tell you an interesting concept. We have our dashboard, and we are able now to create the token, and maybe not the security is not 100%, but Igor can do as it's quite good implementation, and we can give to the user a link based on you can log in to iDempiere directly. Because we don't want to write a new dashboard, for example, but we can attach this link to the kiosk in the warehouse, and you can use iDempiere dashboard without authorization. With authorization, but from the token. So partially it was somehow done. Maybe it can be used or.
Any other question? If no, then thank you everyone.